Welcome back, everybody. This is the second discussion video for chapter 13. We're starting with learning objective 3 here, prepare a make or buy analysis. So when a company is involved in more than one activity through their value chain, right, activities that add value to products or services, we refer to that company as being at least somewhat vertically integrated. So a decision to carry out one of the activities in this chain internally rather than to source it externally from a supplier is called a make or buy decision. Essentially, we're trying to say, is it better for us to make our own component parts, for example, than to buy them externally? An example of this in practice or in the world might be something like General Motors. Right? They make all these different types of cars. They source transmissions from a transmission manufacturer and other parts from some other manufacturers as well. So there's some potential advantages to vertical integration. Typically, we'd see a smoother flow of parts and materials, right? If everything is under our control, we can control the timing of those things and the movement of those things a little better. Similarly, we typically would have better quality control. We're not relying on someone else to kind of address the quality issues. And then assuming that those things are kind of better or easier or more efficient, we should realize some additional profits. And the general take on this, not to get too far off kilter here, but anything that we think someone else has a better, economy of scale to make, especially at a higher or equal quality, go ahead and let them do that. Go ahead and outsource it to them. Now, some potential disadvantages to vertical integration. Companies may actually fail to take advantage of suppliers who can create those economies of scale that I mentioned by sort of spreading demand across a bunch of different manufacturers. And while that economies of scale factor can certainly be appealing, because we should see some increased efficiencies and profits from it across the board, we also have to be careful to retain control over things that are essential to maintaining competitive position. So this speaks to some of those quality control issues. You certainly want to make sure that you are able to control the quality of your finished product to a sufficient standpoint. Anything else that goes into maintaining a competitive advantage as well. Let's look at an example of a make or buy decision. And for our purposes, we're going to focus on just the cheapest alternative. We're going to assume away some of those other considerations and just focus on the numbers. So let's say Essex Company makes some part 4A, that's used in one of its products. Here's the unit product cost for this part. Materials $9, labor $5, variable overhead $1, depreciation of special equipment $3, supervisor salary $2, and general factory overhead $10. So total current unit product cost based on current production, $30 per unit. Now let's say that the special equipment used to make part 4A has no resale value. We'll also say that the total amount of general factory overhead, which is allocated based on direct labor hours, would be unaffected by this decision. So the $30 unit product cost is currently based on 20,000 parts produced each year. Now let's say that an outside supplier comes along and offers to provide those 20,000 parts that Essex needs at a cost of $25 per part. The question is, should the company stop making part 4A and buy it from this outside supplier? So we're looking for the low-cost alternative, which is more profitable. Well, let's lay these alternatives out side by side here. If we buy from the outside supplier, we're paying $25 a unit. We need 20,000 units. That's a total cost then of $500,000. If we make this thing internally, we've got direct materials of $9 a unit. That's a variable cost times 20,000 units, so $180,000 total. Direct labor, we've got another variable cost, $5 per unit, so a total of $100,000. Variable overhead, $1 per unit, or $20,000 in total. Now the depreciation on factory equipment, that's a sunk cost, so that is entirely irrelevant to this decision. We can go ahead and strike that. We're not technically incurring it as we just make this thing. Supervisor salary is relevant. That's an average of $2 per unit, so a total of $40,000 for that person's salary. So we'll add that to the make column. And then the allocated general factory overhead we said was not avoidable in any way. If we make this thing or we buy it from the outside supplier, it's not going to change that cost. So that becomes irrelevant. So if we add up just those relevant costs, we see that the make scenario is total cost of $340,000 versus the buy scenario of 500,000. So in this case, it appears it is less costly to continue to make this thing in-house. And that's in part because of some of these fixed costs that would not go away under either scenario. The other thing I'd just add here is if you prefer, especially early on, to list some of those avoidable costs out under both scenarios, that's completely fine. Just be consistent. You're going to get the same answer either way. So in other words, if I included depreciation of the equipment here in both the make and the buy, that's not going to change my bottom line decision. So just kind of pick whatever you feel more comfortable with. So overall, as we said, the company should continue making this part in-house. The financial advantage of doing so is $160,000. The buy of $500,000 versus the total cost of make there, $340,000. Now, opportunity costs we've spoken about before. Keep in mind those are not actual cash outlays, so you're not going to find them recorded in any accounting information, but they are benefits that we potentially forego by choosing one course of action over another. So let's say for our Essex example from a minute ago, if the space to make part A had some alternative use and could be used to produce another product that could generate some sales and some contribution margin, then we'd have an opportunity cost associated with continuing to make this part 4A in-house instead of the other product we could make that would generate potential profit. So that's how opportunity costs can really come into play in some of these make or buy or even our special order decisions down the road. Let's try another one here. LE Industries is a multi-product company that currently makes 30,000 units of this part MR24 each month for use in production. The facilities now being used to produce MR24 have a fixed monthly cost of $150,000 and a capacity to produce 35,000 units per month. If LE were to buy this MR24 from an outside supplier, the facilities would be idle, but fixed costs would continue at 40% of their present amount. The variable production costs of the part are $11 per unit. If LE continues to use 30,000 units of MR24 each month, it would realize a financial advantage by purchasing from an outside supplier only if the supplier's unit price is less than what? So pause, work through that, and then come back for the solution. That would be A, $14. So we'll lay out kind of the make versus the buy and start there. Under the make scenario, we've got the fixed cost of $150,000. Under the buy scenario, those are going to continue at 40%. So 40% of 150 is $60,000. The variable cost of production were $11 per unit. So times the 30,000 units we're making means we've got another $330,000 here under the make. And that's a total of $480,000 in cost of making. Now the buy, the only thing we had so far was that $60,000 in fixed costs continuing. So what we could do is take the total cost of the make scenario, $480,000, minus the fixed cost continuing under the buy scenario of $60,000 for a difference of $420,000. That's what this is going to hinge on, whether it's cheaper to make or buy from the outside supplier. So if we take that $420,000 then, divided by the 30,000 units that we're going to need to buy from the supplier, that means these things have to cost less than $14 per unit for it to be advantageous for us to take that supplier up on their offer. All right, that brings us to learning objective 4, which was to prepare an analysis showing whether a special order should be accepted. And again, we'll focus on profitability for these. We'll go with the alternative that increases profit for the company as a whole to the greatest extent. Now, a special order by definition is a one-time order that's not considered part of a company's normal ongoing business. If we're analyzing a potential special order, we want to try to focus on incremental costs and benefits. Those fit with our idea of relevance from earlier in chapter 13 here. And typically, since the existing fixed overhead costs can't be affected by the order, they're not relevant. Okay, maybe a special order could be so big that we'd have to add capacity, but that's very unlikely, and for our scenarios, we'll stay away from that. So let's look at an example then. Jet Inc., let's say they make a single product whose normal selling price is $20 a unit. A foreign distributor offers to purchase 3,000 of them at $10 per unit, this cut rate. This is a one-time order that wouldn't affect the company's regular business, so we wouldn't be poaching our own sales by letting them sell it. Let's also assume the annual capacity is 10,000 units, but Jet is currently producing and selling only half that, only 5,000 units. So the question is, should they accept the offer? Well, let's look at their current income statement before considering the special order. So we're adding some data here. They're making and selling 5,000 units at $20, so total revenue of 100,000. Let's assume they've got materials costs here of 20,000, direct labor 5,000, the variable overhead of 10,000, and some variable marketing of 5,000. So total CM of 60,000. And then they've got fixed overhead and fixed marketing, total of 48. So currently net income $12,000. Also point out real quick that the total variable cost per unit are $8. That's the 40,000 total variable cost divided by the 5,000 units that they're making and selling currently. So to determine whether we're going to accept this special order or not, we need to compare the incremental revenue from the order to the incremental cost. Now the incremental revenue was the 3,000 units we're selling to the distributor at $10 each for a total of 30,000. The incremental cost is the same 3,000 units times that $8 variable cost per unit only. Remember, fixed costs by definition aren't changing in total with changes in activity, so we're not really incurring them incrementally to add more units to production here. So 3,000 units times $8 per, or 24,000, means the financial advantage of accepting the special order, 30 minus 24, is $6,000. So all else equal, we'd say, yeah, accept that order. Now this does assume that all the fixed costs are unavoidable and that the variable marketing costs also have to be incurred on the special order. If for some reason that changed, we need to know about that as part of our decision context. Otherwise, we're going to assume that those things are not changing. All right, let's practice another one. Let's say Landor makes and sells electric fans. Each one regularly sells for $42. The following cost data per fan is based on a full capacity of 150,000 fans produced. Direct materials $8, direct labor $9, manufacturing overhead $10, 70% is variable, 30% is unavoidable and fixed. So a special order has been received for a sale of 25,000 fans to some overseas customer. The only selling cost that would be incurred would be $4 per fan for shipping. Landor is now selling 120,000 fans through regular channels each period. Assume that direct labor is an avoidable cost in this decision, so it is truly variable. What should Landor use as a minimum selling price per fan in negotiating a price for this special order? Pause this, work through that problem, and then come back when you're ready for the solution. So that's going to be C, $28. We want to focus on just those incremental costs of producing the new fans. So that's going to consist of the direct materials, $8, the direct labor, $9, and the variable overhead only, the $7. So $24 in variable product costs, plus the variable selling cost of $4 for the shipping. So our break even on that order then essentially is $28 per fan. That's going to be our minimum price. Okay, we certainly want to be losing money on this. Maybe we'll do a break even just to keep a customer happy and generate some future sales. So there's our bare minimum. And I'm actually going to stop the second video right here. Make sure you back up and review anything you need to, and then ask questions as needed as well, and move on to the final discussion video.